So vocal effects are incredibly important to define the vibe of your track, to help your vocals sit right in a mix, and just to add interesting texture to your song. So in my last video on vocal compression, a lot of you were asking about that song and what I was using for delays and reverbs and stuff like that. So I want to dive into that. I'm going to talk about my song Spinning again, and we'll look at some of the effects I used and basically break down 3 key techniques that I use for every single song when it comes to vocal effects. And I'll show you some different variations to kind of get the most out of those techniques. So let's jump in. So first, here's just a refresher of what the song sounds like. All right, so the first technique I want to talk about is slapback delay. So this is a really fundamental effect that I use in pretty much every mix that I do. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the other delays and reverbs, and we'll solo out the vocals. So this is the lead vocal and the double we'll be listening to together with a little bit of slapback. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. So you can hear it's actually quite a loud effect in this. I really wanted to emphasize that kind of layered sound. And so the first way to use slapback that I'm going to talk about is how I'm using it in this song, which is to add texture to the vocals and give it a lo-fi quality, essentially. So instead of just distorting the vocal, what you can do is distort the slapback delay. And what that does is it retains clarity in your vocal, but it still gives you that kind of distorted, crunchy vibe. So let's listen to just the slapback. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. So I cranked the saturation to the max here, have it at about 90 milliseconds, and just kind of one quick slap. Another thing that you'll hear is there's some stereo width to it. So this offsets the left and right channels so that they echo at different times and gives you that stereo effect. So that's one method. Another method is to go even more lo-fi and to do something that's narrower. So maybe you don't really want to add width to your vocal. You just want to make it kind of have that really old school slapback vibe. So we're going to use the tape echo to demonstrate this. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. The echo is sitting right behind the vocal because it's mono, and it's a little bit of a longer echo, and you can hear it's kind of a darker sound. So here's just the wet signal. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. So yeah, kind of subtly different, but it gives you a different effect. It feels a little bit more retro. This is great for like indie folk and stuff like that. I'll use that a lot. And then for pop vocals, I'm usually doing a cleaner slapback delay. So here's an example here. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. And this has a little bit of a longer delay time. This is like 130 milliseconds. It's just using standard studio tape. Saturation is all the way down. Again, I have that stereo width function on. So this is just to add that sense of width and dimension to the vocal, especially if you're mixing vocals drier. Sometimes the slapback is just the key ingredient that helps it sit in a mix well, and it gives you that immediate sense of space. And another thing you can do with pop vocals especially is make it like pretty fast. So if we go down to like 60 milliseconds. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. Then it almost doesn't sound as like it's there. It just sounds like a little bit more thick and layered. So here's without the slapback. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. And with. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. And you can play kind of anywhere in between. If we go to 85. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. Then you're starting to hear it more. It's starting to become more apparent to your ear. So you can play around with the timing and the level to figure out something that just adds just the right amount of dimension. So that is slapback. That's the first ingredient. And the next one is reverb. So should all be familiar with reverb. In this song, here's what the reverb sounds like.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
So yeah, nice plate reverb. I'm using pure plate. One thing that you need to do with reverbs in order to get clarity from them is do some preparation before the reverb. So usually I have a de-esser going because I don't know about you, but I don't really like the sound of S's kind of reverberating into the distance. It just sounds cheesy and kind of, honestly, that could be a cool vibe if you're going for a cheesy 80s kind of vibe, but in general, it sounds much more natural to not have S's drenched in reverb. So if you de-ess your vocal like even more before, it's just going to make the vocal reverb sound so much smoother and blend better. And then a little bit of pre-EQ goes a long way. So, I'm totally all for using the EQ controls on the reverb, and I did that here. But sometimes you need to cut out a little bit more low end more aggressively to avoid it becoming boomy. Let me actually show you what this sounds like because I kind of skipped over the de-esser. So I'm going to bypass the EQ and the de-esser.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
So yeah, it's overall a pretty dark reverb. So it's not going to be an enormous difference, but let's listen to...
Our life is a maze with mirrors. Our life is a maze with mirrors on. Our life is a maze with mirrors.
So right there where the S comes in, you can hear it's drier. It sounds a little bit more tucked in. And sometimes, if you don't de-ess your reverbs, you're going to over de-ess your dry signal. So, and with brighter, splashier reverbs, it becomes even more important. And then let's talk about the EQ. So you can hear it without EQ.
Our life is a maze with...
Has kind of that thick, low mid texture, which could be cool in a sparse track, but in a really busy instrumental, you want to carve some of that out. So before and after, here's without EQ.
Our life is a maze with me. Our life is a maze with mirrors on.
So those are two really important ways to make your reverb sound better, to sound smoother. Another one is to use pre-delay. So here, we're somewhere probably close to 100 milliseconds of pre-delay. I like to be generous. In general, my pre-delay is about a similar timing as whatever my slapback delay is going to be. But it makes a difference in sort of setting the reverb back behind the vocal and letting the vocal not get totally like swamped out by the reverb. So let's listen to it without any pre-delay.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
And with.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
So it's subtle, but you can hear that the reverb almost becomes more apparent. So you can actually use this to make the reverb sound a little bit more apparent in the mix and then turn it down to taste. And it's just going to make the vocal that much clearer. So this can be a really, really helpful tool to have a lot of reverb, like if you're mixing a dream pop song, without it ending up super muddy and just cloudy sounding. And then the last thing that you can do to add a little bit more texture to your reverbs is modulation. And so a lot of reverbs have this built in. In this case, I just used the stock modulation in Logic and just added it afterwards.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
Here's without.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
Let's listen to just the reverb.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
So I actually have the mix so far down that it's virtually not even there. So this is something you can use. In this mix, I am only using it at 5%, so it's virtually not there. But a good thing to experiment with nonetheless. In this song, I think there's so much going on that, it doesn't even really need it. Another trick that I do with vocal reverbs, if you've added your main reverb and you still feel like it needs to sound wetter, or it needs to have a little bit more of like a retro reverb sound, is you can add a mono spring reverb. So I have that here.
Our
I'm going to switch to a different phrase so I don't drive you guys crazy.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
So you can hear it kind of floating in the background behind the vocal. It adds just kind of a really cool, like, ghostly texture that is just, I love the effect of that. And it's pretty subtle in the mix, but it makes a difference. So here's without spring.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense.
And with.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
Yeah, it just kind of adds this cool, like, vintage halo around the vocals, for lack of a better way to describe it. All right, so that's number 2, reverb. And number 3 is a feedback delay. So in this song, that's doing a lot of work. I have the J37 going.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall.
So this is kind of more of your psychedelic feedback delay. So it's just kind of a straight 8th note delay. I've offset the left and right, so you do get some stereo width. And it's a tape delay, so you're getting that natural modulation in the feedback that sounds cool and psychedelic. One thing that you need to do on your delays, just like your reverbs, is use EQ. So in this case, I just use the high pass at 300 hertz, low pass at almost 4K, just to keep it focused in the mid-range so it doesn't get in the way of the vocal. So yeah, you can hear if I didn't do that, it would be a little overwhelming.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense.
Yikes. That is not a great sound. You can roll that off, and then now it's much more palatable.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
Super cool vibes. And another thing, when you're using a lot of delay, it can be helpful to duck the delay. So I have the main vocal, the dry vocal, side chained here, and it's ducking with a compressor every time the dry vocal's there. So that keeps the delay tails from being too loud while the main vocal's there, and then as soon as the phrase ends, they kind of swell back.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
Versus.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
It can just get a little bit too crowded without that. So this is a super helpful technique. And then another really important thing with feedback delay is to send it to your reverb. So reverbs, can only do so much in your mix to cut through if there's a lot going on. But when you send delay to your reverbs, it helps just the whole vocal to sound more ambient. Like, I kind of think of it as you can use stage fog, which is your reverb, but it's not as impactful until you start adding stage lights that shine through the fog. And so the stage lights are your delay. And when you let those kind of flow through your reverb, it makes the reverb more apparent. So let's try that. Let's go just reverb.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
Doesn't sound that reverby, and add delay.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
And all of a sudden it sounds super dreamy. I mean, obviously that's a significant delay, but yeah, this is just something that you should definitely play with if you want a washed out kind of dream pop sound. Let's talk about 2 more ways to do feedback delay. So sometimes you might want to do more of a ping pong effect. If you want something to really kind of play around in the stereo field and add just even more width, this can be a really cool technique.
We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
So you can hear it bouncing back and forth. I love using ping pong delays, especially when you don't want them to be right in your face. And then for vocals where you really don't want a really obvious delay effect, but you still want to benefit from some of that ambience and movement, one thing I like to do is a dual delay. So this is where I'll do different time divisions on the left and right. So usually a quarter note on the left and on the right, like a dotted 8th note. And you can play around with the width and the feedback balance. I like to use a darker sounding delay for this. And again, sending to the reverb.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
And I like to have it at this level where if I play it back in the track, it almost disappears, but you can feel it when it's not there.
Our life is a maze with mirrors on every wall. We're hitting dead ends and nothing makes sense at all.
So that is the third technique, and there are so many other variations you can mess around with, but I think with just these 3 tools, you can do so much with vocals and in so many different genres. So let me know. I probably explained something poorly. You might have questions. Feel free to ask them down in the comments. And yeah, if there's something I left out, maybe I can do a follow-up video. Just let me know. Thanks for tuning in.